Before the Aztecs built their empire, before the Maya rose to fame across the Yucatan, there was another civilization, one that flattened the top of a mountain and carved an entire city into the sky. "2,500 years ago, in a valley surrounded by 3 mountain ranges in southern Mexico, a people who called themselves the Cloud People looked up at the mist that clung to the peaks and decided this was where they would build their world. That world still exists. The state of Oaxaca is unlike anywhere else on Earth. 16 indigenous languages are still spoken here. Over 30% of the population identifies as indigenous, 3 times the national average. The land stretches from mountaintop ruins to bioluminescent lagoons, from cloud forests at 3,000 meters to Pacific beaches where sea turtles nest under the stars. This is not a place that reveals itself quickly. Oaxaca asks you to slow down, to taste, to listen, to climb, because hidden inside this single Mexican state is a story that spans millennia, from the oldest writing system in the Americas to a tree that has watched empires rise and fall, from waterfalls frozen in stone to a lagoon that glows electric blue in the darkness, from a festival honoring a goddess of corn to a night when the dead come home. This is Oaxaca, and its ancient heart is still beating. Around 500 years before the Common Era, something remarkable happened in the valley of Oaxaca. 3 rival societies that had been separated by a no-man's land in the center of the valley came together, and they chose the most ambitious building site imaginable. They flattened the top of a mountain. Monte Albán sits 400 meters above the valley floor, overlooking everything in every direction. It was not just a city, it was a statement of power visible from anywhere in the valley below, and for over 1,000 years, it was the beating heart of one of the earliest civilizations in the Americas. The people who built it are known today as the Zapotecs, but they called themselves the Cloud People. Their origin stories say they descended from clouds, from supernatural beings, from jaguars, and the city they built lived up to the legend. At its peak, Monte Albán was home to around 25,000 people. Its great plaza stretched 300 meters from north to south, flanked by pyramids, temples, and platforms connected by staircases and underground passageways. There was a ball court for the ritual game of Tlachtli. There were over 170 tombs, some of the most elaborate ever uncovered in the Americas, and there were carved stone slabs covered in hieroglyphic inscriptions that researchers believe represent one of the earliest writing systems in Mesoamerica. The Zapotecs didn't just build, they innovated. They developed a calendar. They created a logo-syllabic writing system where each syllable was represented by a different glyph. They used a numeral system of dots and bars that the Maya would later adopt. They engineered irrigation systems and terraced farmland on the surrounding slopes to feed a growing population. By 200 years before the Common Era, Monte Albán dominated the region. Zapotec rulers had extended their influence across the highlands, from Coyotepec in the north to Ocelotepec in the south. The city had become the largest in what is now southern Mexico, and then, around 750 AD, something changed. Monte Albán was abandoned, not destroyed. Archaeologists have found no evidence of war or fire or invasion. The people simply left. Some researchers suggest the surrounding forests had been depleted. Others point to a broader wave of instability across Mesoamerica. The truth is, no one knows for certain. But Monte Albán's story did not end there. Centuries later, the Mixtec people arrived and began reusing the old Zapotec tombs to bury their own rulers. In 1932, Mexican archaeologist Alfonso Caso opened Tomb 7 and discovered one of the most spectacular burial offerings ever found in the Americas: gold jewelry, carved jade, a human skull entirely covered in turquoise mosaic, objects of such craftsmanship that they stunned the archaeological world. Today, Monte Albán is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and if you stand on the north platform and look down at the modern city of Oaxaca spread across the valley below, you are seeing exactly what the Cloud people saw: a kingdom built between earth and sky. The Cloud people built their kingdom in the heavens, but their spiritual counterparts carved theirs into stone with a precision that still baffles engineers today. If Monte Albán was where the Zapotecs governed the living, then Mitla was where they governed the dead. The Zapotecs called this place Lioba, the place of rest. It was their gateway to the underworld. And while Monte Albán was about political power and military dominance, Mitla was about something deeper. This was where the high priests performed their rituals, where sacrifices were made, where the boundary between life and death was thinnest. What makes Mitla unique in all of Mesoamerica is not its size, it is what covers its walls. Every surface of the ceremonial buildings is decorated with geometric mosaic fretwork, thousands upon thousands of individually cut stone pieces, assembled without mortar, fitted together so precisely that even after centuries of earthquakes, many of the patterns remain intact. Researchers have documented over 14 distinct geometric designs, each composed of tiny stones carved to interlock like a three-dimensional puzzle. Nothing else like this exists anywhere in pre-Columbian architecture. The patterns are hypnotic, step-fret designs that seem to shift as you move, spirals that echo the movement of water or wind. Researchers believe many of these symbols represent sky, earth, and the feathered serpent deity Quetzalcoatl, but their full meaning remains debated to this day. Mitla was also the last major Zapotec ceremonial center, still in active use when the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, and what happened next left a scar that is still visible. The Spanish partially demolished the sacred buildings and used the stones to construct a Catholic church directly on top of the Zapotec platform. The Templo de San Pablo now rises from the same ground where priests once burned copal incense and made offerings to the gods of the underworld. Today, both structures stand side by side. A Spanish colonial church growing out of the bones of a civilization that was already ancient when Columbus was born. Walk through Mitla and you are walking through a collision of worlds, a place where two civilizations, separated by an ocean and thousands of years of history, meet in a single frame. The fretwork still gleams in the afternoon sun. The church bells still ring, and somewhere beneath your feet, the place of rest keeps its silence. Mitla whispers of the underworld, but just outside the valley, nature has been building its own monument, one that took thousands of years to form, and looks like nothing else on Earth. High in the mountains east of the valley, at an elevation of over 1,500 meters, water has been doing something extraordinary for thousands of years. Natural springs rich in calcium carbonate bubble up from deep underground and spill over the edge of towering cliffs. As the water flows, the minerals slowly solidify. Layer by layer, century by century, the dissolved rock hardens into massive formations that look exactly like frozen waterfalls. This is Hierve el Agua, the water that boils. The name comes from the bubbling mineral springs at the top of the cliff, which look like boiling water even though they are cool to the touch. The petrified cascades themselves are enormous. Some stretch over 30 meters down the cliff face, their ribbed surfaces catching the light like curtains of white stone draped over the mountainside. At the top, natural pools filled with mineral-rich turquoise water sit right at the cliff's edge. Travelers who visit describe the surreal experience of floating in warm, shallow pools while staring out over a vast green valley that stretches to the horizon. It is one of only 2 known petrified waterfall formations in the world. But Hierve el Agua is more than a geological wonder. Archaeologists have discovered ancient irrigation channels carved into the rock nearby, suggesting that the Zapotec people engineered these mineral springs for agriculture over 2,000 years ago. Long before modern scientists understood the chemistry of calcium carbonate, the Zapotecs were harnessing these springs to water their terraced fields. The site is sacred to the indigenous communities who still live in the surrounding mountains. For generations, they have considered these springs a gift from the earth itself, and they are right. Here, the earth is building something beautiful in its own time. No architects, no engineers, just water, minerals, and patience measured not in years but in millennia. The mountains of Oaxaca hold ancient water and ancient stone, but in the valley below, they hold something even older, a living organism that was already ancient when the Zapotecs were young. In the small town of Santa Maria del Tule, about 10 kilometers from the center of Oaxaca city, there is a tree that demands a different understanding of time. El Árbol del Tule is a Montezuma cypress. Its trunk measures roughly 14 meters in diameter, making it the widest tree on the planet. Not the tallest, not the oldest by some measures, but the widest. Its circumference is so vast that it takes over 30 people holding hands to encircle it. Scientists estimate the tree is between 1,500 and 3,000 years old. That means it was already a substantial tree when the Zapotecs were laying the first stones of Monte Albán. It was growing when the Roman Empire fell. It was standing when the Meztecs rewrote the story of the valley. It watched the Spanish arrive. It survived earthquakes, droughts, revolutions, and the slow march of centuries. For a long time, some researchers suspected the trunk was actually multiple trees fused together. But DNA analysis has confirmed that El Tule is a single organism, one tree, one root system, one continuous life, stretching back to an age when most of human civilization was still being invented. Locals have given names to the shapes they see in the bark. A jaguar, an elephant, a lion. The gnarled surface twists and folds in ways that seem almost sculptural, as if the tree itself has been slowly carving its own portrait over the millennia. The Montezuma cypress is Mexico's national tree species, and El Tule is its greatest living example. But today, it faces a quieter threat than any conquering army. Oaxaca is experiencing a serious water crisis. The water table that feeds the tree's roots has been dropping for decades. The town has taken measures to protect it, but the future of the world's widest tree is tied to a resource that is becoming increasingly scarce across the entire region. A tree that has outlived empires now depends on the choices of a single generation. But to find where the cloud people truly vanished to, you have to climb higher, past the valley, past the tree line, into the mist itself. Most travelers who come to Oaxaca never leave the valley. They visit the ruins, taste the mole, sip mezcal under the colonial arches, and head home. But less than 2 hours from the city, hidden in the Sierra Norte mountains at over 3,000 meters above sea level, there is another Oaxaca entirely. Eight Zapotec villages are scattered across these cloud-forested peaks. Together, they are known as the Pueblos Mancomunados, the Commonwealth of Villages. These communities are not governed by the Mexican federal government. They are self-governing. They have their own president, their own laws, their own legal system. Every member of the community is required to serve 1 year out of every 3 doing communal work. Roughly 3,000 people live here permanently, but over 5,000 contribute to the collective in some way. In the early 1990s, when logging companies and developers came for their forests, the villagers made a decision. Instead of selling their land, they would protect it. They created their own eco-tourism cooperative, built a network of over 100 kilometers of marked trails, and opened their communities to travelers on their own terms. The biodiversity here is staggering. Oaxaca is home to approximately 5% of all plant species on Earth, and the Sierra Norte contains a significant share of that richness. Cloud forests, pine oak woodlands, and subtropical vegetation layers stack on top of each other as the altitude changes. Bromeliads hang from every branch. The air smells of wet soil and copal, the sacred tree resin that indigenous communities burn to send prayers to the mountains. Mornings begin with roosters and wood smoke. Evenings end with stargazing and silence. The cabins are simple but warm, with fireplaces and views that stretch across the Sierra Madre. Local guides lead hikes along ancient Zapotec trade routes that once carried corn, salt, and textiles across these ridges. Around 20,000 visitors come each year, but on most days, you will not see another tourist. The trails belong to the forest, the birds, and the mist. The Sierra Norte reaches for the heavens, but the next mountain range hides a place that feels like a dream you cannot quite remember. Halfway between Oaxaca City and the Pacific coast, a narrow mountain road climbs through the Sierra Sur until it reaches a village that seems to exist between worlds. San José del Pacífico sits at 2,500 meters above sea level. For reference, that is roughly the same altitude as Machu Picchu. But while Machu Picchu receives over 1 million visitors a year, San José remains almost unknown. The village appears and disappears with the weather. One moment you can see the valley stretching far below. The next, thick clouds roll through the pine trees and swallow everything. The air is cool and thin. The forest is dense. Sound travels differently here, muffled by the mist and the canopy overhead. This is a cloud forest, one of the rarest and most fragile ecosystems on the planet. Cloud forests exist only where mountains meet persistent moisture from the atmosphere. They support extraordinary biodiversity, yet they cover less than 1% of the world's total forested area. Mosses, ferns, and orchids cling to every surface. The trees themselves seem ancient, their branches heavy with lichens and bromeliads. San José del Pacífico has long been known for traditional healing practices. Indigenous communities in the surrounding mountains have used medicinal herbs and plants for generations, knowledge passed down through families and healers in an unbroken chain. Mushrooms, both culinary and ceremonial, are deeply woven into the culture of this region. The village's small restaurants serve quesadillas made with wild local mushrooms and Oaxacan string cheese, grilled over a comal and paired with hot cocoa or café de olla, a traditional cinnamon-spiced coffee. There are no ATMs in San José del Pacífico. Phone reception is unreliable at best. The village does not accommodate the digital world. It simply waits for the mist to lift, then lets it settle again. Travelers who stop here, often on their way between the city and the coast, describe a feeling that is difficult to put into words. It is not the adrenaline of a waterfall or the awe of a ruin. It is the sensation of being held by the clouds themselves. San José floats between earth and sky, but follow the mountain road down through the pine forests, and the clouds eventually give way to something extraordinary. The Pacific Ocean. Back in the valley, along the road that runs east from Oaxaca City toward Mitla, there is a sight that most travelers drive right past. Yagul sits on a cactus-covered hill, about 34 kilometers from the city. Its ruins are known locally as the Pueblo Viejo, the Old Town. And unlike Monte Albán, which draws hundreds of thousands of visitors each year, Yagul is often completely empty. That emptiness is part of its power. After the decline of Monte Albán around 750 AD, the Zapotecs did not vanish. They moved into smaller settlements across the Tlacolula Valley. Yagul was one of the most important of these. Most of what remains was built between 750 and 950 AD, during a period when the old order had collapsed and new power structures were taking shape. The site is dominated by its ball court. The Juego de Pelota at Yagul is the second largest in all of Mesoamerica, surpassed only by the famous court at Chichén Itzá in the Yucatan. The ritual ball game played here was more than sport. Across Mesoamerica, it carried deep religious and political significance. The game represented cosmic struggle, light against darkness, life against death. Below the court lies Patio 4, surrounded by 4 temples. On its east side, a carved stone animal, likely a jaguar, still guards the entrance. Nearby, you can descend into underground tombs with multiple chambers, some of the few in Oaxaca that remain open for visitors to enter. The Palacio de los Seis Patios, the Palace of the Six Patios, sits above. Its walls were once plastered and painted red. Today they have faded to a creamy yellow, worn smooth by centuries of wind. But the real reward at Yagul is the climb. A steep path leads up to the Fortaleza, the fortress at the very top of the hill. From this vantage point, the entire Tlacolula Valley opens up below. Fields, villages, distant mountains, and silence. In the cliffs surrounding Yagul, archaeologists have also documented prehistoric caves containing some of the earliest evidence of plant cultivation in the Americas. These caves, together with those near Mitla, form a separate UNESCO World Heritage Site. Yagul guards its secrets in silence, but on the far side of the state, where the Sierra Madre meets the Pacific, another world awaits entirely. Where the Sierra Madre del Sur finally meets the Pacific Ocean, the mountains do not ease gently into the sea. They plunge. The result is one of the most dramatic coastlines in all of Mexico. 18 miles of jagged cliffs, hidden coves and turquoise water protected since 1998 as Huatulco National Park. Within this stretch of coast, there are 9 bays and 36 beaches. Some are wide crescents of pale sand where gentle waves break in clear water. Others are tiny pockets of shore, completely hidden between towering rock walls, reachable only by boat. The Bay of San Agustin, the largest and westernmost, stretches for a full kilometer. The Bay of Cacaluta is surrounded by dense jungle, accessible only by sea or a rugged trail through the trees. The diversity of life here is extraordinary. Over 6,000 hectares of lowland jungle are home to armadillos, white-tailed deer, and over 700 species of birds. Hummingbirds, pelicans, and hawks are commonly spotted from the coastal trails. In the water, coral reefs support schools of tropical fish. Dolphins are frequently seen from the boats that carry travelers between the bays. Depending on the season, humpback whales pass through these waters on their migration route, and olive ridley and leatherback sea turtles nest on the beaches. The marine portion of the park protects over 5,000 hectares of ocean, including coral communities, kelp forests, and underwater rock formations. Snorkelers report visibility of 15 meters or more in the calmer bays. What makes Huatulco unusual among Mexico's coastal destinations is what is missing. There are no towering resort complexes, no cruise ship terminals, no boardwalks lined with chain restaurants. The national park designation has kept much of this coastline in a state that would be recognizable to the fishermen who worked these waters generations ago. Huatulco guards its bays like jewels, but further down the coast, the beaches belong to surfers, fishermen, and a spirit that refuses to be tamed. The Pacific coast of Oaxaca stretches for hundreds of kilometers, and the further you travel from the airports and the highways, the more the modern world falls away. Puerto Escondido is the gateway. Its name means the hidden port, and for decades it was exactly that. Today, it draws surfers from around the world for its powerful beach breaks. Playa Zicatela is legendary in the surfing community, producing some of the most punishing waves in the Americas. But just south of Puerto Escondido, the coast reverts to something quieter. Mazunte is a designated Pueblo Mágico, a small beach town with black volcanic sand, yoga studios, and seasonal sightings of dolphins and humpback whales. The National Mexican Turtle Center is based here, working to protect the sea turtle populations that have nested on these shores for millennia. Just down the coast, Zipolite holds the distinction of being Mexico's only legally recognized clothing-optional beach. Its coves and cliffs attract a bohemian community that has resisted commercial development for decades. Chacahua is a village inside a national park, set between the Pacific Ocean and a vast lagoon system threaded with mangroves. It is reachable only by boat. There are no paved roads no ATMs, no reliable cell phone service. The village was founded in the late 16th century by people who had escaped enslavement. Chacahua is home to one of the largest Afro-Mexican communities in the country, a population that was not officially recognized by the Mexican government until 2015. For centuries, this community has lived at the edge of the map, sustained by fishing, the ocean, and a determination to remain free. And then there is the lagoon. At night, when the moon is dark, the water glows. Millions of bioluminescent dinovlagellates, microscopic plankton, light up in electric blue and green whenever the water is disturbed. A paddle through the lagoon leaves trails of liquid light. A hand dragged through the surface sparkles like a constellation pulled from the sky. It is one of the few places in the world where you can swim in starlight. The coast glows with hidden light. But to understand Oaxaca, you have to taste it. There is a saying in Oaxaca, para todo mal, mezcal, para todo bien, también, for everything bad, mezcal, for everything good, the same. But before the mezcal, there is the food, and Oaxaca is widely considered the culinary capital of Mexico. This is the land of the 7 moles. Each one is a complex sauce blending dozens of ingredients: dried chilies, chocolate, nuts, seeds, spices, fruits, and herbs, ground together and slow-cooked into something that defies simple description. Mole negro is the most famous, deep and dark and layered with flavors that unfold over minutes. But there are also red moles, yellow moles, green ones, each tied to a specific region, a specific family, a specific tradition. The food culture goes far deeper than mole. Chapulines, roasted grasshoppers seasoned with salt, chili, and lime, have been a protein source in this valley for centuries. Tejate is a pre-Hispanic drink made from roasted corn, fermented cacao, and mamey seeds. It is sometimes called the drink of the gods, and its preparation has not changed in thousands of years. Tlayudas, enormous crispy tortillas loaded with black beans, Oaxacan string cheese, and grilled meat, are the signature street food. And the chocolate tradition of Oaxaca predates the arrival of the Spanish by centuries. And then there is mezcal. While tequila is made from a single species of agave, mezcal can be made from over 40 varieties. Oaxaca produces the vast majority of Mexico's mezcal. The town of Santiago Matatlan alone accounts for roughly 40% of the country's total production and has declared itself the world capital of mezcal. The traditional production process is ancient. Agave hearts are roasted for days in underground stone-lined pits, filling the air with smoke. The roasted hearts are then crushed by a stone wheel called a tahona, traditionally pulled by a horse or donkey walking in slow circles. The mash ferments in open-air wooden vats, sometimes for weeks before being distilled in clay pots or copper stills. During the colonial period, mezcal production was suppressed by Spanish authorities who wanted to promote imported European spirits. Indigenous communities kept the tradition alive in secret, hidden in the hills and passed from generation to generation. Today, mezcaleros are celebrated as cultural guardians. Their palenques, the small rustic distilleries where mezcal is made, are considered living heritage sites. Each batch is unique. Each sip carries the flavor of a specific agave, a specific soil, a specific fire. Mezcal is Oaxaca distilled into a single glass, but to witness the full spirit of this place, you have to see it celebrate. Twice a year, Oaxaca transforms. The first time is in July, the second is at the end of October, and each celebration reaches back thousands of years to a time before written history. The Guelaguetza is the largest indigenous cultural festival in Mexico. The word comes from the Zapotec term guendalesa, meaning an offering or a reciprocal exchange of gifts. Its roots are believed to stretch back over 3,000 years to ceremonies honoring Sentiotel, the goddess of corn. When the Spanish arrived, they layered Catholic traditions over the old rituals, but the heart of the celebration never changed. Every July, delegations from all 16 of Oaxaca's ethno-linguistic groups travel to the state capital to perform on Cerro del Fortín, a hilltop amphitheater that seats 11,000 people and overlooks the entire city. Each group performs traditional dances in handmade costumes, every movement carrying the history of their community. The Zapotec, the Mixtec, the Mazatec, the Chinantec, and many others. Each costume, each rhythm, each step tells a story that has been passed down for generations. During the performances, delegations throw gifts into the crowd: handmade crafts, local food, miniature pottery. The act of giving is the point. Guelaguetza is not just a festival, it is a philosophy of reciprocity woven into daily life. Surrounding the main event, the city erupts with calendars, festive parades led by giant papier-mâché puppets and brass bands. The Feria del Mezcal brings together over 300 producers. For 2 weeks, Oaxaca becomes the most alive place in the Americas. Then, in late October, the mood shifts. Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, is celebrated across Mexico, but Oaxaca is widely regarded as the place where the tradition runs deepest. From October 31st to November 2nd, families construct elaborate altars called ofrendas in their homes and cemeteries. Marigolds, candles, photographs, and the favorite foods of departed loved ones are arranged with care. In the cemeteries of Sosocotlan and Atzompa, families hold all-night vigils by candlelight, decorating graves with flowers and sharing meals beside the resting places of their ancestors. Comparsas, costumed parades with painted skulls and music, fill the streets of the historic center. The tradition is rooted in a pre-Hispanic understanding of death that is fundamentally different from the European one. For the Zapotec and Mixtec peoples, death was never an ending. It was a passage. Mitla, the place of rest, was built on this exact belief. In Oaxaca, the dead are not mourned. They are welcomed home. Oaxaca celebrates the living and welcomes the dead, and in doing so, it keeps a promise that is older than memory. After the ruins and the mountains, the waterfalls and the coast, the mezcal and the festivals, there is one more layer of Oaxaca that ties everything together, and you can find it by simply walking through the streets. Oaxaca City is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Its colonial architecture, laid out in a grid pattern by the Spanish in the 16th century, was deliberately built with thick walls and low profiles. This was earthquake country then, and it still is now. The buildings that survived were the ones that respected the ground beneath them. The Templo de Santo Domingo de Guzman is the crown jewel of the city. This 16th century Baroque church was originally a Dominican monastery. Its interior is covered in gold leaf so elaborate that standing inside feels like being swallowed by light. but its history is more complicated than its beauty suggests. During the Mexican Revolution, the monastery was seized and used as military barracks. It was not returned to religious use until the 1990s. The adjoining Museo de las Culturas now houses over 400 artifacts from Monte Albán's Tomb 7, including the turquoise-covered skull that stunned the world in 1932. But the most powerful story of Oaxaca's survival is not found inside museums. It is found in the artisan villages that surround the valley. Each village specializes in a single craft, and each craft carries centuries of knowledge. In Teotitlán del Valle, families weave textiles on large wooden looms using techniques passed down through generations. The natural dyes come from the land itself: indigo from plants, yellow from marigold, and red from the cochineal insect, a tiny creature that lives on prickly pear cactus and produces a crimson pigment so vivid that during the colonial period it was the second most valuable export from the Americas after silver. Cochineal was worth more than gold. In San Bartolo Coyotepec, artisans shape barro negro, a distinctive black pottery made from local clay and polished to a metallic sheen without any glaze or paint. The technique was refined in the 20th century by a potter named Doña Rosa, whose innovation of burnishing the clay before firing created the luminous surface that has become an icon of Oaxacan craft. In San Martín Tilcajete, families carve alebrijes, these fantastical creatures, dragons, jaguars, winged serpents, mythological beasts, are hand-carved from copal wood and painted in explosions of color. Each one takes weeks to complete. Each one is unique. These are not souvenirs. They are acts of resistance. For 500 years, indigenous artisans in Oaxaca have maintained their techniques, their materials, and their stories in the face of colonization, modernization, and globalization. Every thread woven in Teotitlán, every piece of black clay shaped in Coyotepec, every creature carved in Tilcajete is a quiet declaration that this culture was here before the conquest, and it will be here after. The mist that gave the cloud people their name still settles in the valley of Oaxaca at dawn. It drifts between the mountains the way it always has, past the ruins where a civilization wrote its first words in stone, past the place where the living and the dead share the same doorway, past waterfalls that nature spent millennia turning into sculpture. It passes a tree that was already old when the world was young. It climbs into Sierra villages where communities still govern themselves by the same principles they held before any outsider arrived. It spills over the edge of a mountain road and into a village that exists between earth and sky. It follows the rivers down to a coast that glows in the dark, where a lagoon full of ancient light reminds us that the most extraordinary things are often invisible until you are willing to go where no road leads. And it returns, always, to the valley, to the markets where mole simmers in clay pots over open flames, to the palenques where agave hearts smolder underground, to the amphitheater on the hill where 16 peoples gather to honor a goddess of corn, to the cemeteries where families sit beside their ancestors, and share a meal by candlelight. Oaxaca does not perform its history for visitors, it lives it. Every meal is an inheritance. Every thread is a memory. Every sip of mezcal carries the taste of volcanic soil and patience and fire. This is a place where the ancient world did not end. It simply continued, quietly, stubbornly, beautifully. The cloud people are still here, still offering, and the heart of Mexico is still beating.